Hello and welcome to the latest edition of our Think Kent Discover series. Today we'll be screening our film Colombia's Women, A Hidden Workforce and finding out how Kent Law School's Professor Luis Eslava has led a team helping to change the face of social care provision in the South American nation. Later on, we'll be joined by two of the stars of the show, with Professor Eslava joining us to answer some of your questions, along with Lina Buscelli, the Director of the Observatory of Women's Equity, or OEM for short, at Isesi University. As ever, we're streaming live on YouTube, and so if you have any questions or comments for our panel, you can send them in via the chat sidebar. We'll get stuck into those in a few moments' time, but for now, let's take a look at Colombia's Women, A Hidden Workforce.
My name is Luis Eslava. I'm based at the University of Kent Law School, where I am co-director of the Center for Critical International Law, and I also direct the IEL Collective Initiative Raptures 21. What we aim to do in the Raptures 21 initiative is to advance projects that are international, interinstitutional, interdisciplinary, and that seek social transformation. The Life, Gender and Work project starts from the very well-known fact that women are the ones that make life possible across the planet. But particularly they do fulfill this role and carry out this work in zones of conflict. The main achievements of the project have been precisely to speak with to women, to seek their views about how they want to see a national system of care, developing what they see is the main contributions to the maintenance of life, as well as we have been able to speak and to be here and be in a constant conversation with leaders at the national level involved currently and that for sure will be involved in the future. My hope with the Life, Gender and Work project is that we're able to intervene in conversations within Colombia, regionally and internationally, to the construction of more responsive national systems of care. If we manage to achieve that, we will be contributing to the inauguration of a new generation of public policies within Colombia and more broadly of public policies that are really attentive to the true diversity, not only of Colombia, but of the world. Colombia is a country extremely diverse, but heavily centralized. Bogota is the capital city of Colombia and continues to concentrate, regardless of decades of efforts to decentralize power, the main institutions of the country. It is always important in Colombia to intervene, to go to Bogota, to talk about public policies, while at the same time paying attention how the city is crisscrossed by the same problems that characterize other parts of the nation.
I think it's essential to think differently and to think how, for example, a decision, in my case as a judge, or if you're a politician, your public policies or your laws impact people. We have very few resources to go to the regions and to see directly what is going on with the people there. So I think the project has two benefits. The first one is to make visible the situation there, but also to call attention to the problems that women are facing in a daily basis.
When the academics take the time in order to be really profound and they get to know what we are doing, that is useful. When they just come and they reproduce generalities or they reproduce misconceptions, that just helps to increase the ignorance and to increase malperceptions, and that definitely doesn't help. That is a problem.
Cali's interesting has been always very international in its orientation, but as a city, it is crisscrossed by massive socioeconomic inequalities. Because of its location, it is also a place that receives on a daily basis hundreds and thousands of residents of the Pacific Coast of Colombia. We are conducting the Life, Gender and Work project in association with the Observatory for Women's Equity that is based in Cali.
El Observatorio para la Equidad de las Mujeres fundamentalmente ha detectado 3 brechas preeminentes en Colombia, especialmente críticas en el suroccidente y en el Pacífico colombiano. La primera tiene que ver con el trabajo de cuidado y una sobrecarga de este trabajo por el bienestar de la vida que recae sobre los hombres de las mujeres. Estamos hablando de 3 horas más en promedio. La segunda brecha muy importante está relacionada con las violencias de género. Y aquí en el suroccidente colombiano también estamos en una zona crítica para hablar de cuáles son las limitaciones que generan las afectaciones de violencia en términos de autonomía. Terminando, tenemos la autonomía política o la brecha en participación política. Y eso también es especial en esta zona porque estamos detectando, por ejemplo, que de las 1.506 mujeres encuestadas en el último instrumento del observatorio, el 100% de ellas hacen trabajo comunitario. Eso quiere decir se conectan con sus comunas, con sus vecindades, se conectan con sus iglesias, haciendo trabajo colectivo, haciendo trabajo social. Sin embargo, cuando vamos a ver los indicadores institucionales, vemos que solamente el 3% de las mujeres logra ingresar a cargos de elección popular que tomen decisiones fundamentales dentro del debate público local y nacional.
Tenemos la violencia económica, violencia de género, violencia psicológica, violencia física, adicionalmente el tipo de violencia en el cual el patriarcado entra como a oprimir esa mujer, también el de racismos, el de rechazo frente a la compañera.
Como mujeres somos unas guerreras porque cuando queremos algo, luchamos hasta conseguirlo. En cambio los hombres, si no ven de pronto dinero, que los ofrezcan por eso, no lo hacen. Pero en cambio las mujeres, sin esperar nada a cambio, seguimos luchando porque vemos que después ya va a tener fruto.
It's really important to influence public policy because they allow to make visible everything that women are denouncing in the rural areas. Their demands, most of the time, do not make it into a mayor's office or a governor's office or the president's office. So these type of projects allow them to influence the public policy, to introduce their own ideas, their own experiences, their own demands in the framing of the new rule of law for the future.
Tumaco is a town that has been historically affected by the conflict in Colombia for many, many decades. However, it is a city that is going through a massive process of transformation thanks to the effort made by local leaders as well as political leaders that are trying to seek a different future for the residents of Tumaco, but in particular trying to make sure that we support women's efforts to transform their own town and to be heard properly and adequately in the right places.
It is extremely important to think about women in rural areas such as Tumaco because their lives are at stake. They are constantly facing extreme conditions of violence. It's not only their lives that is at stake, but also their history and their dignity. So it is extremely important that the state, the academy and social movements come together to make sure that they can find alternative lives, alternative conditions to survive the current context.
El machismo es una práctica muy común en territorios como los nuestros, en donde podríamos decir que la mujer lidera el desarrollo de su hogar y de la sociedad, pero no termina siendo la protagonista visible del mismo. Y lamentablemente, y no lo podemos ocultar, hemos sido, y me incluyo, víctimas de rechazo, de racismo, de clasismo, de muchísimas cosas. Y pues obviamente tiene que hacerse un trabajo diferencial, necesariamente, porque además de ser mujer, somos mujeres negras o somos mujeres indígenas, con características diferentes, para mí no especiales, porque yo creo que todas somos capaces más allá de la condición, pero lo que sí es cierto es que ha existido una vulneración importante desde la sociedad hacia esta piel, hacia esta mujer, hacia este cabello, hacia lo que somos nosotras. El ejercicio que ustedes hacen en el territorio es supremamente importante porque lo que buscamos es que la mujer se empodere, la mujer entienda de qué es capaz y que saque a la luz todas esas capacidades. Y todos estos procesos son tan importantes porque permiten que la mujer se arriesgue. ¿Y se arriesgue a qué? Se arriesgue a crear asociaciones, se arriesgue a participar en procesos democráticos, que se arriesgue a liderar procesos de emprendimientos, y eso permite desde luego salir adelante. Siempre lo hemos dicho, si la mujer está bien, su familia está bien y la sociedad está bien. Fortalecer a la mujer, invertir en la mujer, es invertir en el desarrollo del territorio.
Ahora tengo más posibilidad porque tengo más cosas que he aprendido para darles a todas las personas que necesitan de mí, y de todas, y de todos. Entonces, sí, aprendí muchas cosas aquí, muchas cosas. Tengo argumentos como de enseñarles a mis compañeras que el trabajo de una ama de casa es valioso y vale también como lo que vale un trabajo cualquiera. Entonces, ya tengo armas para poder luchar eso.
Todo esto que están haciendo ustedes aquí en Tumaco va a dar una gran repercusión respecto a todas las acciones de desarrollo o el tejido político o comunitario del municipio o distrito posiblemente. Es que darles a identificar que la importancia de la unión, la educación y el desempeño mutuo va a ser muy importante para que todos nosotros podamos lograr que Tumaco sea un mejor pueblo o distrito.
Nosotras podemos, digamos, replicar, que es lo que, por lo menos yo siempre cuando aprendo algo, no es solamente, digamos, dejarlo para mí, sino poderlo replicar dentro de las comunidades.
Debemos romper como esos estereotipos de que la mujer es el sexo débil cuando no es así. Y estos espacios de formación se prestan para eso, para poder seguir reconociendo y reconstruyendo de que nosotras las mujeres podemos hacer y ser lo que nosotras queramos.
There we have it, Colombia's Women Hidden Workforce. As I said, joined by two of the stars of the show, Luis Eslava and Lena Buscelli from the OEM, as we saw there. And if you've got any questions for our panel here today, remember to send them in via the YouTube live chat sidebar. Lots to unpick there. Luis, I'm going to come to you first. Obviously, seeing the film there, first time putting it out into the public. When you watch it, obviously, it's a chance to reflect on all the work from the project that you've done and all of those collaborations you've had. What's it like watching the film?
Thank you. It is fantastic to see it finally out, and in particular, it's wonderful to see the women that struggle on a daily basis to maintain their families and make life possible in their communities in Tumaco, telling the world the work that they do in very difficult circumstances, but saying that they work, telling us what the work that they do in the way they usually do, with force, power, conviction, and a really lovely sense of humor. It is also interesting to see how the documentary captures the complexity, the many complexities at play when we try to think about how to respond to women's daily work and care work. So the documentary does a very good job at showing the different levels of governance that are at play on a daily basis in this type of discussions. So there's the national level, there's the regional level, and it's the local level. And my participation in this project through the Raptures 21 project, bringing an international perspective, also invite us to think about that level. And similarly, the documentary invite us to think about that when we think about the possibility of establishing a system that recognizes women's work, we shouldn't just assume that one national recipe will do the trick. Um, in contexts that are as diverse as Colombia, we need to pay attention to ethnic and racial and territorial differences that characterize these countries. And Tumaco, as we saw in the video, it is a very rich place. It is a place that has been the victim of the Colombian long internal conflict, as well as structural racism and the usual kind of negative and long-standing damaging work of patriarchal structures on the lives of women. There are a few other things that the documentary are not able to bring into the view of spectators, but they are important to mention. One of the things that we have found out in the project is the incredible number of hours that women perform on a daily basis in order to maintain the families and the communities. That, as I hope spectators know, it overpasses anything that men actually do. And that work is done in environments that very precarious, both in terms of infrastructure, which the documentary suggests, but also that environmentally damaged seriously, which are additional variables that we need to take into account when we think about how to compensate women for the work that they do.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and only 12 minutes to get all of that in. I definitely want to spend the remainder of our chat to unpack some of that. It'd be obviously really interesting to come to you, Lena, shortly to talk about some of those the findings and the field research that you've done as part of OEM. But Luis, just sticking with you, let's go back to the very beginning. I think it's worth mentioning that you yourself are Colombian, but how did you come across this line of research, and what was it about this area of research that you really wanted to tap into and really work on?
Thank you. It's a
Oh, sorry, Luis. We're having a few technical gremlins there. We're going to try and get you back on the line very, very shortly. We'll work on that as ASAP. Lena, I'm going to come to you first. So we're starting at the very beginning. Luis will obviously come back and tell us a little bit about how the project began and his involvement in the project. For you, though, obviously one of the big things that we wanted to get across in the documentary was collaborations and how they're so important with organisations, with people out in the community. How did you and the OEM come to start collaborating with Luis?
I mean, I have thank you very much, Cameron. You are so nice. I have a long relation, a friendship relation with Luis that started working in Colombia, here in Cali, asking question about poverty, about inequality. So Tumaco, we visited Tumaco like 5 years ago, and Tumaco is one of the most poorest cities here in Colombia, and what like generates a big interesting for us is that in Tumaco we can put together another pieces of interest that we are thinking at that moment. You know, about like economical inequalities, but also about gender inequalities. And we, during like 3 years, seeking a funding for this project, and then Luis and Warwick University, Kent University come up with a financial support in order to think about poverty in the south of Colombia. And I think that it's very important, the collaboration. I mean, it's important because now you are watching a piece of Tumaco internationally. So I think that it gives dignity, that gives visibility, that gives a lot of symbolical capital to people in Tumaco. So, and this is so important. But also, collaborations are important and critical for us because they distribute resources, symbolic resources, material resources. Luis and you guys are there in Tumaco and give like the people some piece of your time, some piece of your life, some piece of your attention. And for vulnerable people, I think that it means a word. But also collaborations allow us to thinking about Tumaco, thinking about inequalities, thinking about feminist question in Tumaco. And the academy and the public policy and the things that we can derivate through this work it starts in our collaboration. So it's meaningful for us.
And like you said, giving a platform there, I mean, Tumaco, I must admit, is not a place I'd ever heard of before going out and recording the documentary, and being able to give that platform is obviously really important. And as you said, there's so many divisions along the lines of race, of gender, socioeconomic background. So it's phenomenal to have seen that firsthand. Unfortunately, though, we obviously see in many other parts of the world, South America and beyond, that this isn't the case purely just in Colombia. It is an international issue. What makes, Lina, what makes Colombia such a different case study to other parts of the world in this regard?
I think that for that question, like intersectionality helped me to explain, because what happened in Tumaco and in Colombia mainly is that we have a complex scenario that shows how race and ethnicity, but also poverty, but also gender, but also literacy, but also geographical isolation combined to like produce a geometrical view over vulnerability, over marginalization. And then it's very interesting to see how these vectors work in order to put women, especially in other places, in difficult places. We have an amazing findings of this project. One of them is, for example, that when the state is out, when you don't have public services, are women who like put the face and give welfare to the population. So it's like an undiscovered relation between women and the state that is fixed by a woman hiding first. And then is the issue about global connections of care. You know, we find that, for example, in Tumaco, you have persons that go out from Tumaco and get in Bogota or in an international scenario and sell her care services. So you have a very global phenomenon that starts in Tumaco and connected other cities in the world in a phenomenon that we can call like global change, care global change, and connect different points of our geography with circuits of distributions of care work. So I think that it's very, very important to put our view in Colombia, because unfortunately we have a context that shows how difficult very different situations of inequality produce effects over women's lives.
Lina, thank you very much. I'm delighted to say we've got Luis back on the line now. Luis, going back to going back to the very beginning, and Lena very eloquently there talking about the various disparities that we can see in Colombia. For you, what was it about maybe those disparities, about your own Colombian background, that drew you to this line of research and going down the route that you have done?
Thank you. I think I just would like to respond to the question that I was not able to respond before. I just at least a couple of words about it. I got interested in this line of research thanks to the work that Lena and her colleagues at the Observatory for Women's Equity have been doing for a long time, which tries to highlight how women and the realities of women and women's work are central to understand how society functions, but in ways that we cannot see because there is not enough information for us to see it. So the observatory for many years now have been trying to bring to the surface those hidden realities. And in this project, what we try to do is to try to bring to the surface the work that women do that remain hidden. Obviously, it's a work that we all know that exists there. So I think that connects with my possible answer to this question is that I have been interested in my research more broadly on how life works in ways that we normally perhaps refuse to see or understand, or are unable to see or understand, but that once you pay close attention to those hidden realities, then you discover an entire universe of social relations that are crucial for us to appreciate the real effects of formal mechanisms to tell us a story about the operations of the planet, while at the same time kind of putting aside or taking out of the picture what is happening on a daily basis. So this project helped me to kind of get into Tumaco, to see those hidden realities, and feel very fortunate that I was able to do that with the people that have taught me about the women's realities at the Observatory for Women's Equity.
And Luis, you were talking about formal mechanisms there. I'm guessing that's in relation to legislation, government, that side of things. What's been the response from the Colombian government and maybe other governments in the region to the work that's been going on?
Thank you. So the traditional response to women's work and women's necessities have been to implement a formula that is very well known to many people in the audience from developing countries. So the idea of inviting citizens to formalize, to get a job in the formal labor market, to agitate the creativity in order to become themselves businesswomen or businessmen, and while at the same time offering some level of public services, depending on how well off a nation is. And the story finishes there. Now, the issue is that that formula hasn't worked, is not working, and we are afraid that it's not going to work. So we, for a long time, scholars and progressive governments across developing countries have been trying to think beyond the usual in order to respond to women's necessities. And one of those lines of new work is this idea of the possibility of establishing national systems of care. Basically, the idea there is to establish systems that recognize women's work in order to ameliorate the care loads that women perform on a daily basis, and recognize women's daily care work. And the idea with that possibility of establishing those type of systems of care is that you will create societies that are more resilient and, importantly, women that are able to secure an income and have the capacity to save, both for the daily maintenance and for times where life will get harder, particularly in the older years. Now, this idea of national systems of care, even though it sounds quite kind of grandiloquent, or could sound quite grandiloquent and too ambitious, is already being put into operation in many different countries. So there are examples, incipient examples in Brazil, some examples in Chile, and the current government of Colombia is really interested in pursuing this line of work. And what we have been trying to do in the Life Gender Work Project is offer input into that conversation in Colombia and regionally, in particularly emphasizing the importance of those national systems of care to pay attention to diversity, the diversity that exists on the ground. In the case of Tumaco, this expresses itself in different forms. So one of them is that women in Tumaco, because they are very aware that they can simply jump into formality, they want to remain sovereign over the capacity to secure an income. Okay, so in terms of a national system of care, what we hope is that the policies implemented will recognize the work that women do as part of their daily care responsibilities, while at the same time give them the possibility to continue to secure an income otherwise. In terms of the way in which women in Tumaco understand their sexual and reproductive health, they should remain autonomous and then should be able to enjoy a corporate dignity that help them to experience, for example, maternity in the way that Afro-Colombian communities understand being a mother. And finally, in the case of Tumaco, that diversity expresses itself also in the way in which communities on the ground continue to be victims of really precarious levels of infrastructure, both material infrastructure in terms of public services, as well as institutional infrastructure that should be there in order to enable women to participate effectively in the design of public policies and in decision making in the territories.
Absolutely, Lena. I'm going to come to you about that. Luis mentioning there at the end about women being having that platform to change policy, getting involved at national as well as national as well as grassroots, local level, being really, really important. And in that documentary, we saw lots of representatives from local grassroots organisations, all the way up to Dr. Aurora Figueroa Vergara, who's now, I believe, the Minister of Education in Colombia. So they're seeing all the different kind of the range of involvement that women can get into in terms of policy in Colombia. But I think you were saying there's only about 3% in the documentary. You're saying about only 3% are actually involved in making those decisions. We obviously shot this some time ago. We shot about a year ago. In that year, have you seen a change? Has there been, with people like Aurora now in government and the government beginning to take notice of Luis's work, are you seeing a change? Are you seeing there's more women getting involved in policy and wanting to get involved in policy?
I do. I really do, and it's amazing. For example, we have now 9 candidates to be a mayor here in Cali, and this doesn't have precedent. And I think that we have a vice president President Francia Marquez, who is a woman from the north of Cauca, very close to Cali. But I think also that it happened because in the last 10 years, the social movement, the women's social movement, has been institutionalized. And you just watched it in the video. This topic about care work and the measures of the care work and how that affects the big counts of economy. It's a very technical one. But if you watch, women are now talking about this difficult topics. And I think that it's amazing because like in the very grassroots, in the very organical dimension, it gives them vocabulary, process of advocacy, and capacity to interact with the state. And this is like it's a very important point in the constructions of public policy in general, but also in the personal process that makes you a family leader or construct family leadership. So I think I do think that this percentage are going to change, and I do think that the most important piece of this change is that we now have popular women in decision, like in a decision positions. For example, Aurora born in Chocó, which is in Tzmina in Chocó, which is one of the poorest departments here in Colombia, and now is the former Minister of the Education. This is amazing. So it's not only that they are women, it's also that there are popular women, and this is a big deal for us.
Question sent in, and just a reminder, any of you watching the YouTube stream at home, if you do have any questions for Luis and Lena, do send them in. Lena, like I said, a question for you. You talked a little bit there about Aurora, obviously a great success story. Have there been any other success stories from the women featuring in the film, or from any of your field work that you've seen in the last year? What have been some of the big success stories that you've witnessed?
Yes, we have the mayor. We just talked with Luis that the mayor of Tumaco. It's amazing, and she won 2 prizes, like state prizes that recognize her management in the municipality. So, and she is a woman that born in Tumaco, that has to travel to Cali in order to get his professional degree, and then return to Tumaco and be a mayor. And she is one of the 3 mayors in Colombia that has an indicator of the best indicator of management in the municipalities. So yes, there are a lot of women that have amazing stories, like Tumaco's mayor, but also Francia Marquez. Francia Marquez, born here in Norte del Cauca, and now is the vice president of the Colombian government. And we are talking about national system of her because of her, because it's her agenda. So that shows that when popular women take the power, things can change a bit, but change.
Absolutely, some incredible successes there, as you've as you've pointed out. Luis, about those successes, it's obvious to mention governments change though over time. There's, we can see that here in the UK as a very clear example. So there's always a sliding door of people in those positions. So with that in mind, how can you ensure the legacy of the work that's being done? Is that part of the work, ensuring a legacy?
The aim like in any type of academic work that tries to have an impact, is to make sure that these conversations that we're having here that have definitely an academic undertone are transformed into public policies, which in Colombia means both public policies as and no more broadly. So initiatives. The nitty-gritty of norms and institutional building, as well as the passing of laws at the national level that secure the establishment of a national system of care in the medium terms and the long run. This is really important for two reasons. One is that if that's achieved, that means that the country will need to reorganize economically in order to finally recognize the work that women have been doing historically in Colombia and as they do elsewhere. In the other reason is that if that law is passed, there is the first step towards consolidating a proper welfare system in Colombia, which will add to other first steps that have been taken in the current government towards that aim. For example, at the moment, there is a big labor reform going through the parliament in Colombia. Similarly, there is a health system reform. There is an primary and high school educational reform, as well as a tertiary or higher education reform. And all of these different pieces of the puzzle, what they're trying to do is once again to establish a kind of welfare system in a Colombian version. And again, the aim there is that change is done with an aspiration of changing things in the near and the long term.
And we heard in the documentary, Luis, we heard Justice Angel Cabo there talking about how it's really difficult as a lawmaker to bring in laws and legislation because A, limited resources, B, for such a big and diverse country, it's very hard to get out to your constituents to find out the issues that impact them and therefore help them. So obviously some challenges there that she's mentioned. How have you found with the project and talking to people from all backgrounds and all levels of local and national government? How have you kind of found that there might be ways of overcoming these challenges?
I think one way to overcome those challenges is something that something that Lina mentioned before, is collaborations. So I don't think I would have ever been able to get to Tumaco to the level that we have been able to do in this project if I wouldn't have done this work with the Observatory for Women's Equity, as well as from a local organization called Coyagropaz that have for more than 2 decades trying to advance alternative development initiatives in the municipality, hand in hand with Tumaco, women from Tumaco or Tumaqueñas and Tumaqueños. So collaboration, I think, is one way to do that, and this is definitely the way that scholarly work can be enriched and definitely also help those collaborations to bring information back to the centers of power. Institutionally, I think the ambition of Colombia for a long time has been to become a decentralized country. That's a big task that Colombia has been trying to advance for the last at least 3 decades. And things is slowly getting better, and there is a recognition that in order to have public policies that have weight and are effective, local voices need to be heard. But that's an ongoing task because of something that we know that is not going to go away, which is the lack of resources, but also because of the impulse of state structures to be centralized. And in Colombia, that's easy because there's a long tradition of centralism. So having a strong politicians from the different regions of Colombia now working at the national level, as Lina was mentioning before, for example, having the vice president being from Chocó, near where Tumaco is located, the minister of education being from the region as well. That is a way definitely to make a change.
And Lina, coming to you, it was really, like I said, it was really empowering hearing some of those voices in the film. And Yendi, the teenager that we spoke to in Cali, talking about women being fighters, really kind of putting that sort of vocabulary of all this being almost a bit like a battle. And with that in mind, the involvement of men, we haven't spoken about that, but we did see a handful of them involved in those workshops and at the conference. How important is it to have men involved as allies and part of this conversation?
It's so important. It's so important. Just for recapitulate the question that you make to Luis, in order to national system of care, one of the topics, the big topics in that public policy is, like, of course, you know that women has a lot of care work to do. If you can distribute, or if you could distribute, who or what person, what organization, what infrastructure are going to make this care work. And the first answer is like males in the families, fathers, brothers, and people that in the family can receive care work in order to balance the unbalanced care work distribution. So the process of formation of new versions of masculinities that can think in care, in empathy, in the interdependencies, in relationships. Different is a big deal in this debate and in the public policy, and we that are professors have to think every morning in order to change masculinity and change gender roles and the social division of labors that has to do a lot with gender. So we need new men, definitively.
We're coming to the business end of this event. Like I said, if you've got any more questions to send in on YouTube, do feel free to do that. But we're just going to be beginning to wrap up now. Lina, going to come to you first. We heard from the mayor of Tumaco there. You mentioned her earlier on. And there's a phrase that she said that's really stuck with me since, which said to strengthen women, to invest in women, that is to develop the region. I just wanted you to give a kind of a final comment on that, Lina, on those words and sort of the future and the legacy. What needs to happen next to ensure that that more women get into positions of power, that the systems change that Luis has been talking about, that they come into place? What needs to happen next, Lina?
I think that we need to impact public policy. And I think that the beauty of this project is that understand the problem in other terms. For example, in the measure dimension, we now know that if you want to make a change from the state, you need to put attention to the measure of the care work, how the care work is measured in a rural population like Tumaco. Because it's different, the measure that you deploy in a big capital city. And then what, and Luis just mentioned that, how you can think in public policy that really face the problem. So we need state intervention, we need public policy that think over these questions, but in a public scale. So we need a public enforcement and a state enforcement to change a public policy and move the structure of sexual division of work.
And Luis, a final word to you. What are going to be the next chapters of this project? What can we see in the coming years happen?
So the project involved several steps. One of the initial ones was to understand what was happening with the sexual division of labor, as Lina put it, in Tumaco. On the basis of that information, we ran a statistical exercise, and then finally, with the insights from our quantitative and qualitative data, we ran a training program to give back to women in Tumaco inputs in order to advocate for themselves at the regional and national level in this big discussion of the establishments of national systems of care. So what we are hoping to see in the future is women from Tumaco intervening there in those spaces, speaking clearly, again, as they always do, powerfully and with a fantastic kind of approach to life, about what they need and what they would like to see in these public policies that we were discussing here about. If that happens, I think we will have, be very happy, and then we will be witnessing the inauguration of that new chapter in not just in Colombia, but once again in many similar countries that are struggling to finally see the emergence of welfare systems that finally responds to the people's needs.
Well, we watch that with anticipation and a great deal of excitement. But that's about all we've got time for. Thank you so much, Luis and Lina, for joining in this live panel discussion. And a big thanks to you watching at home and sending in those questions. To read more about this and many other amazing research projects taking place at the University of Kent, you can head on over to www.kent.ac.uk/research. In case you missed it at the top of the programme, here's another chance to watch Colombia's Women, a Hidden Workforce. But that's it from all of us here. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
My name is Luis Eslava. I'm based at the University of Kent Law School, where I am co-director of the Center for Critical International Law, and I also direct the IEL collective initiative Raptures 21. What we aim to do in the Raptures 21 initiative is to advance projects that are international, interinstitutional, interdisciplinary, and that seek social transformation. The Life, Gender and Work project starts from the very well-known fact that women are the ones that make life possible across the planet. But particularly they do fulfill this role and carry out this work in zones of conflict. The main achievements of the project have been precisely to speak to women, to seek their views about how they want to see a national system of care, developing what they see is the main contributions to the maintenance of life, as well as we have been able to speak and to be heard and be in a constant conversation with leaders at the national level involved currently and that for sure will be involved in the future. My hope with the Life Gender and Work project is that we are able to intervene in conversations within Colombia, regionally and internationally, to the construction of more responsive national systems of care. If we manage to achieve that, we will be contributing to the inauguration of a new generation of public policies within Colombia and more broadly of public policies that are really attentive to the true diversity, not only of Colombia, but of the world. Colombia is a country extremely diverse, but heavily centralized. Bogota is the capital city of Colombia and continues to concentrate, regardless of decades of efforts to decentralize power, the main institutions of the country. It is always important in Colombia to intervene, to go to Bogota, to talk about public policies, while at the same time paying attention how the city is crisscrossed by the same problems that characterize other parts of the nation.
I think it's essential to think differently and to think how, for example, a decision, in my case as a judge, or if you're a politician, your public policies or your laws impact people. We have very few resources to go to the regions and to see directly what is going on with the people there. So I think the project has two benefits. The first one is to make visible the situation there, but also to call attention to the problems that women are facing in a daily basis.
When the academics take the time in order to be really profound and they get to know what we are doing, that is useful. When they just come and they reproduce generalities or they reproduce misconceptions, that just helps to increase the ignorance and to increase malperceptions, and that definitely doesn't help. That is a problem.
Cali's intestine has been always very international in its orientation, but as a city, it is crisscrossed by massive socioeconomic inequalities. Because of its location, it is also a place that receives on a daily basis hundreds and thousands of residents of the Pacific Coast of Colombia. We are conducting the Life Gender and Work project in association with the Observatory for Women's Equity that is based in Cali.
El Observatorio para la Equidad de las Mujeres fundamentalmente ha detectado 3 brechas preeminentes en Colombia, especialmente críticas en el suroccidente y en el Pacífico colombiano. La primera tiene que ver con el trabajo de cuidado y una sobrecarga de este trabajo por el bienestar de la vida que recae sobre los hombres de las mujeres. Estamos hablando de 3 horas más en promedio. La segunda brecha muy importante está relacionada con las violencias de género. Y aquí en el suroccidente colombiano también estamos en una zona crítica para hablar de cuáles son las limitaciones que generan las afectaciones de violencia en términos de autonomía. Terminando, tenemos la autonomía política o la brecha en participación política. Y eso también es especial en esta zona porque estamos detectando, por ejemplo, que de las 1.506 mujeres encuestadas en el último instrumento del observatorio, el 100% de ellas hacen trabajo comunitario. Eso quiere decir se conectan con sus comunas, con sus vecindades, se conectan con sus iglesias, haciendo trabajo colectivo, haciendo trabajo social. Sin embargo, cuando vamos a ver los indicadores institucionales, vemos que solamente el 3% de las mujeres logra ingresar a cargos de elección popular que tomen decisiones fundamentales dentro del debate público local y nacional.
Tenemos la violencia económica, violencia de género, violencia psicológica, violencia física, adicionalmente el tipo de violencia en el cual el patriarcado entra como a oprimir esa mujer, también el de racismos, el de rechazo frente a la compañera.
Como mujeres somos unas guerreras porque cuando queremos algo, luchamos hasta conseguirlo. En cambio los hombres, si no ven de pronto dinero que los ofrezcan por eso, no lo hacen. Pero en cambio las mujeres, sin esperar nada a cambio, seguimos luchando porque vemos que después ya tener fruto.
It's really important to influence public policy because they allow to make visible everything that women are denouncing in the rural areas. Their demands, most of the time, do not make it into a mayor's office or a governor's office or the president's office. So these type of projects allow them to influence the public policy, to introduce their own ideas, their own experiences, their own demands in the framing of the new rule of law for the future.
Tumaco is a town that has been historically affected by the conflict in Colombia for many, many decades. However, it is a city that is going through a massive process of transformation thanks to the effort made by local leaders as well as political leaders that are trying to seek a different future for the residents of Tumaco, but in particular trying to make sure that we support women's efforts to transform their own town and to be heard properly and adequately in the right places.
It is extremely important to think about women in rural areas such as Tumaco because their lives are at stake. They are constantly facing extreme conditions of violence. It's not only their lives that is at stake, but also their history and their dignity. So it is extremely important that the state, the academy, and social movements come together to make sure that they can find alternative lives, alternative conditions to survive the current context.
El machismo es una práctica muy común en territorios como los nuestros, en donde podríamos decir que la mujer lidera el desarrollo de su hogar y de la sociedad, pero no termina siendo la protagonista visible del mismo. Y lamentablemente, y no lo podemos ocultar, hemos sido, y me incluyo, víctimas de rechazo, de racismo, de clasismo, de muchísimas cosas. Y pues obviamente tiene que hacerse un trabajo diferencial, necesariamente, porque además de ser mujer, somos mujeres negras o somos mujeres indígenas, con características diferentes, para mí no especiales, porque yo creo que todas somos capaces más allá de la condición, pero lo que sí es cierto es que ha existido una vulneración importante desde la sociedad hacia esta piel, hacia esta mujer, hacia este cabello, hacia lo que somos nosotras. El ejercicio que ustedes hacen en el territorio es supremamente importante, porque lo que buscamos es que la mujer se empodere, la mujer entienda de qué es capaz y que saque a la luz todas esas capacidades. Y todos estos procesos son tan importantes porque permiten que la mujer se arriesgue. ¿Y se arriesgue a qué? Se arriesgue a crear asociaciones, se arriesgue a participar en procesos democráticos, que se arriesgue a liderar procesos de emprendimientos. Y eso permite, desde luego, salir adelante. Siempre lo hemos dicho, si la mujer está bien, su familia está bien y la sociedad está bien. Fortalecer a la mujer, invertir en la mujer, es invertir en el desarrollo del territorio.
Ahora tengo más posibilidad porque tengo más cosas que he aprendido para darles a todas las personas que necesitan de mí y de todas y de todos. Entonces, sí, aprendí muchas cosas aquí, muchas cosas. Tengo argumentos como de enseñarles a mis compañeras que el trabajo de una ama de casa es valioso y vale también como lo que vale un trabajo cualquiera. Entonces, ya tengo armas para poder luchar eso.
Todo esto que están haciendo ustedes aquí en Tumaco va a dar una gran repercusión respecto a todas las acciones de desarrollo o el tejido político o comunitario del municipio o distrito posiblemente. Es que darles a identificar que la importancia de la unión, la educación y el desempeño mutuo va a ser muy importante para que todos nosotros podamos lograr que Tumaco sea un mejor pueblo o distrito.
Nosotras podemos, digamos, replicar, que es lo que, por lo menos yo siempre cuando aprendo algo, no es solamente, digamos, dejarlo para mí, sino poderlo replicar dentro de las comunidades.
Debemos romper como esos estereotipos de que la mujer es el sexo débil cuando no es así. Y estos espacios de formación se prestan para eso, para poder seguir reconociendo y reconstruyendo de que nosotras las mujeres podemos hacer y ser lo que nosotras queramos.